Hello, and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art. Week by week, moment by moment, we are following Jonathan Riddell, choreographer and artistic director of Riddell Dance Theater, as he creates his latest works for RDT's Second Story Dance project and delves into new creative territory. Today we'll be focusing on Jonathan's music initiative and the October 3rd Second Story rehearsal. So, in the week leading into the rehearsal, John was a busy guy. So on the content creation side of things, John was finalizing the order of the songs in his album, and he was tinkering with an idea for one mistake, using an electronic loop of a chime sound and deciding, okay, if you're going to use it, where and when should I use it in this particular song? But on the marketing / administrative side of things, you were very, very busy preparing lots and lots of materials to submit to Steffi Nassen so that they could do it. They have to do for their part to get ready for the choreographers showcase at the Emmeline. And we were thinking strategically and coming up with some marketing ideas in terms of how we're going to approach music industry colleagues with John's album. And as all of this is going on, I know that John is chomping at the bit to get his music out there. So I'm reminded, John, of conversations you and I have had, especially over the last couple of years, with regard to the business responsibilities that are associated with creating art. And I know for a long time you felt anywhere from irritable to frustrated to anxious about various...
To downright angry.
Yeah, that too. You know, about various marketing and administrative and fundraising functions. And eventually, though, I think you started viewing these tasks as key elements shaping the context within which you present your work. And of course, you want to ensure that all of those different components are consonant with your overall vision. So in a way, then, these other functions are, in fact, part of creating art, not separate from it. That said, here we are immersed in various marketing and administrative functions related to your album and to the November and December shows. So, of course you understand their importance, but I sense this restlessness. I just have to get my music out. So then I ask you, how do you maintain this hard-won perspective when, in fact, these tasks are starting to feel burdensome again?
Yes. Well, I'll address it in sort of two halves. The from the choreography standpoint and the administrative tasks that go along with supporting that. That's all stuff that I'm pretty used to doing at this point. So that isn't nearly as burdensome as some of the new challenges I'm facing with this album. So I'll address those things in a minute. But so in terms of the choreography, that really wasn't that isn't really what's getting sort of the hairs on the back of my neck riled up. But it is sometimes a burdensome task. But the more, as you sort of touched upon, and I'll elaborate, the more I think about it as an extension of the art, then it can be, it can seem quite purposeful, quite fulfilling, and even quite fun. I would equate it to, if a painter were then to really consider not just his painting, but okay, now what frame would I choose for this painting? What wall would I hang it on in a museum?
Exactly.
What would I want the lighting to be in that museum? What paintings might I want it next to? More of my own, or would I want it next to others, to new artists, to celebrated artists, to iconic artists? So you can, if you start to think that you have a bit of creative control by working on these things, and you sort of let your fantasy go bigger beyond just the piece of art itself, but into how it's being presented, how it's being talked about, how it's being written about, then, composing a paragraph describing it doesn't sound so far removed from what from where your heart is, which is the work itself,
Right.
for example. So things like that. That's how I approach those things. Is okay. Well, this is really an opportunity for me to. For example, they ask me for a video clip of the work so they can make a promo out of it. And then I think, okay, well, don't look at, here's this strange, unrelated task where suddenly I have to go find a video clip and edit it myself. Isn't that weird? I'm not a video artist. I'm a choreographer. It's like, well, no, think about it as, wow, from this video, what is the best 30 seconds, what's the best minute, what's my favorite part of this video of my work, and let me choose that and hand it over to people. So the more you take ownership of it, then suddenly it actually starts to become fun. Ooh, I get to look at my work for a little while and pick out my favorite moment. So that's how I wrestle with that. And again, or I say wrestle, but even enjoy doing that. The music is different because I'm new to this particular field, and I'm very anxious at this point, at least for some, if not all, of the songs to be shared and heard by my friends and family. And for various reasons, while I've thought at numerous stages, like, I'm ready to at least put this one song out, or maybe these two songs out in a way that people can at least listen to them, if not, buy them or whatever. But for very purposeful reasons, I've held back from doing that. But it just... I'm just so anxious. And it's hard when, because it's not like I'm waiting for a show where there's going to be, where I need, people to do the lighting and people to present the work and for audience to show up and arrive. Like, if it were a live piece of work, I would understand, like, well, the show is 4 weeks away. That's when you'll get to share it. This is like, at any minute I could just push a button and those songs would go up online and my friends could hear them. It's like, but there's reasons that you're waiting. But those reasons are like, they're just churning in my mind. And do I really have to wait? Do I not? Maybe I shouldn't wait. Maybe I no, stick to your guns. It's just...
It's tough.
It's just stressful. And I want it to be done.
Well, actually, this leads me to think about pulling the lens back and taking a bigger picture look in general when artists create work, because, and I'm thinking about some other conversations we've had over the years where I think that theoretically one could work on a piece of art forever. Continually developing it over time as contexts shift. So, assume that that is true. How do you finally make the decision to share what you've done with the public, knowing that you could go off into the sunset and keep working on it and working on it? You know, how do you finally, hit that green button, so to speak, and go, okay, I'm going to go. And maybe this is the perfect time to ask the question, because in fact you're really thinking about that all the time with regard to your music.
Yeah. I would say, in general, and we've talked about this before. I don't know if we've talked about it on a video cast before, but I tend to think about a work of art not necessarily reaching perfection, but it entering a zone of goodness, of greatness. And sort of once it's at least sort of ticked all the boxes, and once it's sort of arrived at a place, not the place, but a place where I'm happy with it on sort of all levels, then I say, okay, this is ready. Again, it doesn't mean that there's not more little nuances I could tweak, but it's good enough. It's good enough. And I think that partly comes with experience, sort of knowing where. It's a bit like drawing, if I can equate it to like psychology and personal relationships. It's a bit like drawing boundaries. It's like, I know from experience what my boundaries are. Like, nope, the piece isn't quite ready yet because of how I feel about it, and because of maybe this facet of it. Maybe there's still more technical notes I want to give, or maybe I still need to push the dancers emotionally, for example. But once I know that the piece has arrived at that place, my boundary drops and I go, okay, great, I can now share this. I've definitely been in situations where, for me, in my heart, a piece has gone out too early, and that can be really hard. Some people might say, but Jonathan, it was fine. You're being too, you've got your talons in it a little too much. But that doesn't change what's in my heart. And my heart was like, nope, it wasn't quite there yet. And what I've found is that I always am wondering, what if in that case? Oh, but what if I had been able to fix those one or two things that in my heart I know I wanted to fix? Would the piece have done even better? Would it have impacted the audience more? Would I be happier with it? And again, it's just sort of over time, I think, with enough experience, I've learned sort of, for me, what those boundaries are, what my standards are, and how to achieve them quicker and more efficiently in rehearsals too. And that we've talked about. Yeah.
Well, would you say then that I'm thinking about your remark about the case where you felt it went out too early? You're creating art in context with many, many, many contextual variables, and might any one of those, if not many of them, ultimately impact that timeline.
Yes.
Where it's not optimal, but you absolutely don't have a choice.
Well, yes, and I would equate that with the reasons why I let it out early. I would say, well, the reason why I put that piece out, again, too early in my heart, in my point of view, is because of the context. Because, certain rehearsals just got canceled, and so we had to do the best we could. That costume fell apart for some reason, and so we had to patch it together, and that's why it looked that way. And and that always happens. It always happens.
Right.
So that's nothing to beat yourself up over, but it doesn't change the fact that it still went out.
Right.
And in my heart, I'm like, was too early. It really is part of the business. And you have to find a way to be okay with that. But maybe I haven't truly found a way to be okay with that, because I would definitely say there are performances of works, or works maybe that only received 1 or 2 performances, and so that was all I got to show them, that I feel like I still, like that regret kind of is still in there, like that little bit of that what if is still there, and no matter how much I tell myself, context, it was the situation, this is the business, this is how it is, and that's all true, and the audience is very forgiving, and people will appreciate it for what it is, and many people love it anyway, I'm happy to say, but still I'm like, contrary to that, the pieces that are done in my heart and I get to put out there, to me, then I'm bulletproof.
Wow.
No matter what people say, I'm like, I don't care. It fit my criteria. It was in my zone. I'm putting it out there. You love it, you hate it. So what? And that's how I want to feel.
Absolutely.
About everything.
Oh, a quick follow-up with regard to criteria. I'm reminded, actually, thinking about the book, in one particular section when I had interviewed Jonathan originally to determine and get you to specify what criteria you used to evaluate your work once it was out in the public. And you were, in fact, quite specific, and I have included that in the book. So quickly here, do you consciously or not quantify in that kind of specificity good enough each time? Is it pretty specific? Do you know what those boxes are you're checking, or is it by now sort of an overall impression?
I would definitely, well, I think right now I'm going with more of an impression. I'm letting all those boxes sort of exist in sort of my experiential mind. Like I've been through this process enough that I can kind of feel it at this point. I don't need to think intellectually so much about it. And again, that comes in terms of dance with my comfort level of dance. I'm much more questioning about my music because I'm,
of course,
it hasn't been tested so much. So I have more doubts. I have more questions about that.
Understandably.
Yeah. So maybe I do go through more of a checklist, but I don't know. I think maybe because there truly is no pressure with the music right now. I can truly put it out whenever I want. There's no gig that I have where I have to present it or anything. So I have the freedom to just go more with a gut instinct about it.
And stay with us week by week to see where that gut takes him, of course. And at this point now, we're going to take a look at the October 3rd second story rehearsal. And right off the bat, we had 3 external challenges. Of course, number 1 was that poor John could not attend rehearsal because his son Edgar was sick. Number 2 was that Mandy had to leave early to deliver a speech to her alma mater, Purchase College, which of course is a lovely thing.
Yes, we were happy about that.
We were happy.
Yeah.
Number 3 is that Lorena had to bring Sebastian to rehearsal. So first, quickly, John, just starting off with number 1, here we were 5 weeks before the big day at the Emmeline, and you're not able to make it to rehearsal.
Yeah.
Feelings, thoughts?
Well, I was certainly bummed. I have to say I couldn't dwell on that too much because I was taking care of a sick child.
Yes.
and that included doctor appointments, as well as a second child who was healthy and needed to do fun things and happy things. So I was certainly split in many directions, and taking anything off my plate was a blessing. So not going to rehearsal at least freed up some time for me, but in the back of my mind there is that pressure of TikTok, the show's coming up. I will say it is always a comfort to me to know that I'm working with professional dancers who can certainly make the best of the time. Always, you always want a director to be there to give you that outside eye, but truly a lot of work can be done among dancers, and I feel like there's always really special intimate work that can be done among the dancers without the director. It's almost like, all right, dad's out of the picture, and now the two sisters can really bond over what this is for them, you know? So in that respect, I was like, okay, well, maybe this is a good time for Mandy and Lori to just work together on it. And that's what they did. And I'm grateful that, again, I can trust them to do that. And by all reports, they did indeed do that. But the other sort of bizarre thing about our situation is we're 5 weeks away, which maybe actually kind of sounds like that's a lot of time, but we only rehearse once a week. So it's only 5 rehearsals away.
Right.
So, and if you put that into a normal schedule, that's like 1 week. So it's like the show's a week away.
Good point.
Which again, it's like, you know, what are my thoughts? It's bizarre. It's weird to think like, well, it's still over a month away. What am I worried about? Well, we only have 5 rehearsals, and I missed one of them.
But we managed, and in a bit I'll let you know exactly how Lorena and Mandy handled it. But first, to address external challenge number 3, which is, of course, that Sebastian was with us in the studio. Now, normally, Sebastian is now in daycare / preschool full-time. But Lorena had to take him out on this particular day because following the rehearsal, they had to go to a doctor's appointment. So this was a disruption in his usual routine. And at first, he was pretty psyched to share with me his cool toys.
Oh, sure.
And they were pretty cool, I must admit. But I guess certainly I was not enticing enough company for that long, because in short order he wanted Mom, and he beckoned her to come with him to the Steffi Nossen lounge where there were even more cool toys. And when that couldn't happen, he would go, you know, right in, you know, center stage and tug on her pant leg and beg her to come. And it reminds me, John, of when we talk about when things are a setup. And it's a real setup, of course, because the one time he's pulled out of daycare by Mom, of course he wants to be with Mom all the time. I would. So understandable, makes sense. But I think this actually brings up an interesting dynamic for us to take a look at, again, pulling the lens back just a bit. If we think about it from the beginning, Second Story was an environment where choreographers and dancers could create while simultaneously caring for their young children in the studio, as Jonathan, Mandy, and Lorena are all primary caregivers. And over time, they became quite adept at juggling the creating while caregiving dynamic. In fact, it often appeared to me as if the integration of those two roles was nearly seamless. And I think we all became used to operating under these conditions, and consciously or not, expected to deal with these dynamics when we walked through the door at rehearsal time. Well, gradually, over time, some of the kids started to go to school full time. Then we're off all summer on hiatus. And when we come back in September, literally all the kids are now in some type of full-time program, which meant that the caregiving piece was really no longer part of the equation. And then here we are, October 3rd, with Sebastian back in the studio. And I think we were all thrust back into an environment that had become so familiar, but was now kind of becoming a bit of a memory at the same time. And interestingly, although it doesn't surprise me at all, everyone slipped right back into creating while caregiving mode.
That's good.
You
Glad
know,
to hear it.
at least on the surface. But I tell you, John, I had to wonder if psychologically everyone really had to readjust to a context,
sure.
that is one at once familiar and new, which is a little schizophrenic. Shouldn't use that word, but okay. And it was interesting because several times in the course of rehearsal, I heard Lorena and Mandy say, how did we ever get any work done with kids in the studio? And they just shook their heads and just couldn't believe it. So, John, let's talk for a bit about the implications of this disorienting shift in dynamics.
Sure. Well, again, I wasn't there, but I'm going to...
But I have a cheat sheet for him,
You're
too.
a cheat sheet for me. But I'm going to guess and pull from my own experiences as to what that's like. Well, yeah, first of all, this is the company we've created, the project we've created. It's... And we never discussed really... going forward, at least not yet, without the kids. Like, it's just so it's sort of we're all still on board for having the kids there, and yeehaw, it just happens that slowly the kids are getting older and going in their own directions. Right. So there's fewer and fewer children in the studio, and then there are even those days where there are none. And we were now entering this sort of time period where the first couple of rehearsals of us coming back, we were all surprised. Oh my goodness, wait, there's no kids here. Is that way? But
we're shocking.
But we're the dancers with kids. That's what we are. And we were like, okay, so it almost took an adjustment to get back to what a truly adult environment might be like. And oh well, and I think a little bit too of like, we can get more done now because we can really like buckle down and push through and challenge ourselves and push ourselves the way we used to, or not, or we can kind of lay back, enjoy our free time, dance tempting. A little, create a little, laugh a little, and that's great too. So it really is whatever we want to make of it. That said, we do have a show coming up. We do have a deadline. We have a specific piece we want to rehearse. So and then there you go. Suddenly you have a situation where, your kid has to come to work with you. And how does anybody deal with that? Well, you do the best you can, and you try and do the best by the child. And, of course, as you said, there's no blame on the child. It's just, it is what it is. And maybe you try and enjoy both sides of it. So it doesn't surprise me that they, just like riding a bike, went right back into all of their skill sets of being great parents, great moms, and great dancers at the same time. And yet going, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
now we're trying to do something with, we're trying to do two things at once. And how did we ever do that beforehand? And it's funny too, because I think about, I'm constantly worried about, as a dance teacher, that side of my career, I'm constantly worried about the fact that I have a specific class schedule that is, I'm expected to show up a certain number of days a week at certain times, and I have students who are expecting me to be there, and blah blah blah, and a boss who expects me to be there, and with having my children, it's continuously nerve-wracking, because I'm always thinking, if one of them coughs, immediately I'm like, wait, don't cough, because I have to teach tomorrow. And if you're sick, then what do I do? Like,
that's right.
And it's horrible to think like I'm not just thinking about the health of my child. Oh, my child is coughing, is there something I need to do, or do I need to just let them rest, or whatever? It's like I think of those thoughts, but I also think, and what am I going to do about my class? And then I feel guilty that I'm like layering these things onto each other. But
except they're both part of your
they're all part of me and who I am in my life.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure we all, whether you have children or not, we're all negotiating things like that somehow.
Yes.
But I don't know, something about children just makes it all the more specific, because here's this other person that you're responsible for, and you're trying to raise them and teach them about life, blah blah blah. So it makes everything seem super important.
Oh, sure.
And the notion that maybe today I just have to bring my child to work with me. In these environments that we think of as hyper professional and mature and adults, and where we get work done and we think about highly intellectual things, and it can be sort of jarring to think, well, I'm going to bring this sort of, this young, wildly creative, wildly physical force into that, and at the same time, why not? and I have become much more comfortable doing that. I consider it now a viable option. I've okayed it with my boss and classmates and colleagues. They almost any time I bring it up, like, hey, would it be a big deal if one day I had to bring my 1 or 2 kids with me? They're like, please, come on, bring it. Like, most people, as long as you can get a good chunk of the work done, they're rather sort of excited to have that presence there. So I also have to remember, like, sometimes it's me setting this sort of arbitrarily high bar for what a professional environment should be. And really, if I kind of relax, everybody's on board, work can get done. Mandy and Lori certainly got a lot of work done, as they told me and as you told me, and you manage and you negotiate,
and they did. And just to sort of wrap up with what it was they did, they started out with a run through of brittle branches, and I heard them speak to one another almost the whole way through as they were clarifying choreographic details. That then enabled them to figure out where the gaps in memory were and where they were having difficulty remembering the qualitative notes that you gave them the week before, John. So they said, okay, let's go back through the entire piece, bit by bit, breaking it down and verbally discussing it, and really kind of getting that foundation back underneath of them. And it really was very, very helpful, I think, in clarifying a lot of the choreography, because by the time they went into the final run through, it was much better. And you could see they felt a lot better about it. And as a final thought, both Mandy and Lorena said a couple of interesting things, I thought. First, Mandy noted to me that she felt she was really rebuilding her confidence in her movement. That had started to wane, I think, because she really had not thought much about the piece, and certainly had not rehearsed it over the summer because we were on hiatus. And so I think as her confidence is restored, so too is her ability to internalize the qualitative details that you are sharing with them. And so that process is underway. And Lorena said that, okay, Sherry, you want a summary of today? Here it is. She said, today we clarified the steps. Next week, we can't wait to see John so we can clarify what the steps mean. I thought that was great. And there you have it. And that's how the rehearsal wrapped up. But they were, clear about what they still needed to do, and definitely looked forward to your being there to help them to do it. We can't be without the director for too long. So we certainly look forward to hearing more about the qualitative development of this piece, because if I'm correct, John, I think more and more your notes are really focused now on developing those types of things, particularly emotional depth.
Yes, emotional depth, character,
and characterization.
Things like focus, gesture of the hands, the things that really speak detail, that speak about the character's thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. So I'm sure that next week we will have a great deal of detail to share with you and see how that impacts the dancers and you as well, John. So we thank you for being with us this evening. We look forward to seeing what happens not only in the studio, but with the electronic music, and whether or not he pressed the green button between this videocast and the next one. Stay tuned and have a great night.
Bye-bye.